On April 15, 1912, an indelible date was marked in world maritime history. That dawn, the Titanic, hailed as the largest and safest ship ever built, bid farewell to the world in the cold waters of the North Atlantic. What was meant to be the beginning of a new era in transatlantic travel turned into a tragedy that continues to shake the world more than a century later. Since then, countless experts, historians, and enthusiasts have tried to reconstruct the chain of events that led to the Titanic's sinking. And while many facts are well documented, others remain shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions. This Cronoearth documentary will not only explore 10 of those unresolved enigmas, but also delve into 5 of the most unsettling conspiracy theories that have emerged around the ship and its fate. If you're passionate about the secrets of the past and history's great enigmas, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell, because there are still many worlds left to explore. Let's begin with one of the most troubling questions. Why was the Titanic sailing so fast in an ice-filled region? On the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic plowed through the icy waters of the North Atlantic at more than 22 knots, nearly 41 kilometers per hour, a surprising speed for a transatlantic liner of that size, especially considering that it was in a region notorious for its dangerous concentration of icebergs. What many still wonder today is why such haste. Over the years, the official explanation has been that Captain Edward John Smith, a veteran with more than 40 years of naval experience, had unwavering confidence in the Titanic's engineering. To him, the combination of modern technology, watertight compartments, and cutting-edge design made the ship a floating fortress, virtually unsinkable. That faith may have clouded his judgment, but not everyone is convinced that arrogance or overconfidence was the only reason. Other theories have emerged, some as disturbing as they are plausible. One suggests that the captain intended to break a crossing record, completing the voyage between Southampton and New York in record time, which would have been a huge publicity victory for the White Star Line, the company that owned the Titanic. Achieving that feat would have placed the ship and its company as a symbol of technological supremacy over its rivals. Another hypothesis, even more intriguing and supported by later research, points to a little-known fact: a hidden fire in the boilers. According to this theory, days before departure, a fire had broken out in one of the coal bunkers, a blaze that remained active for much of the voyage. Rather than extinguish it completely, the crew may have tried to burn through the flaming coal more quickly to control its spread. This required keeping the Titanic at consistently high speed, which could also have weakened the hull structure in the area exposed to the heat. If this last theory is true, it would not only explain the Titanic's rush, but also why its structure gave way so easily after the collision. An invisible fire, slowly consuming the heart of the ship, may have sealed its fate even before it struck the iceberg. Thus, the Titanic's first mystery is not only a matter of speed, but also of responsibility, hidden decisions, and possible truths buried beneath the waves. But if you think that was strange, wait until you discover what caused the Titanic to split in two. What was found on the ocean floor would change everything. For decades, it was believed that the Titanic sank whole, like a giant sliding to the ocean floor. But in 1985, a discovery on the seabed changed everything. Why did the Titanic break in two? For decades, it was thought that the Titanic had sunk in one piece, gliding beneath the surface of the ocean with the same elegance with which it was built. This idea was reinforced by fragmented survivor testimonies, the confusion of that night, and the absence of clear physical evidence. However, everything changed in 1985. When an expedition led by oceanographer Robert Ballard discovered the wreck of the Titanic more than 3,800 meters deep. There, scattered across the seabed, lay two main sections of the ship, the bow and the stern, separated by hundreds of meters. This discovery completely revolutionized the understanding of the sinking. The Titanic did not descend whole but broke in two during the process, a crucial detail that forced experts to reassess everything once believed about its design and structural strength, structural resistance. But why did it break? The most widely accepted explanation points to a failure in the distribution of weight and pressure during the sinking. When water flooded the forward compartments, the Titanic began to tilt forward. The angle of the tilt increased progressively until the rear of the ship. The stern rose dramatically above the water. This tension placed immense pressure on the center of the hull, right between the two heaviest sections, and that is where the fracture occurred. However, the break was not just a matter of pressure. The Titanic's design also played a fundamental role. Its famous watertight compartments, considered a marvel of safety at the time, did not reach the full height of the hull, meaning that water could spill over from one to the next as the ship tilted. This design flaw turned what was supposed to prevent sinking into a fatal domino effect. But there's more. Metallurgical studies conducted on the wreck have revealed that some of the rivets used in the Titanic's construction contained high levels of slag, an impurity that made them more fragile under pressure. In addition, the steel of that era was not treated like modern steel. Research suggests it became more brittle at low temperatures, which would have made the hull more prone to fracturing upon impact with the iceberg and during the final collapse. Taken together, these factors, imperfect design, vulnerable materials, and extreme conditions, created a scenario in which the Titanic's integrity could not withstand the ocean's test. The image of a giant broken in two, sinking in silence, not only changed the narrative of a tragedy, it also reminded us that even humanity's most ambitious achievements can fall victim to the smallest of flaws. And if you were surprised at how the Titanic broke apart, what happened with the binoculars is even more absurd and tragic. One of the simplest mistakes, yet with tragic consequences, was the absence of binoculars on the most critical night. And the reason is as absurd as it is tragic. Where were the Titanic's binoculars? On a ship as imposing as the Titanic, one would expect every safety detail to be carefully accounted for. Yet among the most baffling aspects of the tragedy, there is one that continues to spark disbelief more than a century later. The lookouts had no binoculars on the night of the sinking. It seems a trivial, almost absurd oversight, but it had catastrophic consequences. Aboard the ship, high up in the forward mast, the lookouts were tasked with scanning the horizon for any obstacles. That night, the darkness was dense and moonless. The sea was eerily calm, which paradoxically made spotting icebergs more difficult, as there were no waves breaking against the ice to provide a visual warning, and the binoculars, locked away in a security locker. The reason for this oversight is as frustrating as it is real. The officer responsible for the key, David Blair, was replaced at the last minute before departure, as part of a crew reshuffle ordered by the White Star Line. In his rush to leave the ship, he forgot to hand over the key to the locker where the lookouts' binoculars were stored. Thus, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee stood their night watch with the naked eye, forced to rely solely on their vision, limited by the darkness and the conditions of the North Atlantic. At 11:40 p.m., Fleet was the first to spot the iceberg, but by then it was too late. The obstacle loomed out of the darkness like a silent wall. The Titanic tried to turn, but the distance was insufficient. The collision was inevitable. Later, during the official inquiries, Fleet himself testified that, had they had binoculars, they might have spotted the iceberg early enough to avoid the crash. The forgetfulness of a simple key, a small piece of metal that could fit in a pocket, became in retrospect a symbol of what went wrong that night. A chain of small decisions, human errors, and oversights that together doomed the largest ship in the world. Thus, the mystery of the binoculars not only reveals a logistical failure, it represents the fragility of planning, even in the grandest of projects, and reminds us that, on the margins of history, sometimes the smallest detail can unleash the most devastating consequence. Sometimes, an ignored warning seals destiny. On the night of April 14, 1912, a message arrived from a nearby ship, but no one on the Titanic's bridge ever read it. So then, why did the Titanic ignore the ice warnings? Minutes. Sometimes, that's all that separates life from death. And on the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic ignored a warning that could have changed everything. Just a few miles away, the SS Californian, a cargo ship halted by a dangerous field of ice, sent a direct warning to the Titanic. Its radio operator, Cyril Evans, was trying to alert the Great White Liner that it was steaming straight into a deadly trap, a zone packed with icebergs. Conditions were so extreme that the Californian itself had chosen to stop completely and wait for dawn. But on the Titanic, the warning fell on deaf ears. The chief radio operator on board, Jack Phillips, was busy, overwhelmed in fact, relaying passengers' personal telegrams to the receiving station at Cape Race, Newfoundland. At the time, personal messages were a luxury enjoyed by the elite, and the Titanic's Marconi station was a symbol of modernity. Phillips had been working non-stop for hours, struggling with a backlog of messages caused by an earlier power outage. When the Californian's message interrupted his transmissions, Phillips dismissed it angrily, replying with a phrase that would go down in history: "Shut up, I'm busy with Cape Race." And so the warning was lost in the static of the Atlantic. There is no evidence that the signal was ever passed along to the bridge. Captain Smith never knew that a nearby ship had stopped its engines because of the ice. The chain of command had failed at the most critical moment. That very night, Phillips continued transmitting messages until the very end, even after the collision. He became one of the invisible heroes of the tragedy, sending distress signals until the ship's power finally failed. He perished in the disaster. His body was never recovered, and with him went the answer to one of the most haunting questions. What would have happened if he had simply delivered that message? Would the Titanic have slowed down, strengthened its lookout? Could the collision have been avoided? No one can ever know. But what is certain is that a warning voice in the darkness was silenced by routine, and the price was devastating. This mystery, more than a technical error, is an eternal lesson about the importance of listening, even when we believe we have everything under control. And while the distress calls faded into the night, less than 20 kilometers away, another ship watched in silence. Why did it not respond? The answer will chill you to the bone. Less than 20 kilometers from the Titanic, there was another ship, the SS Californian. Its lights could be seen in the distance, but it never approached. What happened that night? What became of the Californian, the ship closest to the Titanic? As the Titanic sank, just 20 kilometers away, floated the Californian, a vessel that had stopped that night because of the ice. Several survivors claimed to have seen its lights on the horizon, and even flares were fired into the air in hopes of being spotted. But the Californian never responded. The official explanation is baffling. Its sole radio operator, Cyril Evans, had switched off the set and gone to sleep just before the collision. No one was available to receive the Titanic's distress signals. The Californian's captain, Stanley Lord, admitted to seeing the flares, but said he did not realize they were distress signals. He did not wake his operator or attempt to approach. In the subsequent inquiries, he was harshly criticized. Although never formally blamed, his inaction may have cost hundreds of lives. Over time, this lack of response has fueled darker theories. Was it simple negligence, or something more? The mystery of the Californian remains one of the most painful omissions of that night, reminding us that sometimes salvation is close at hand, but silence can be deadlier than ice. So far, we've looked at 5 mysteries surrounding the Titanic, but others remain just as unsettling. What do you think? Which of these do you find most puzzling? Leave it in the comments. We want to know your thoughts. More than 2,200 people on board, and lifeboats for just over 1,000. The official reason was the law. But some believe luxury and aesthetics mattered more than life itself. Why weren't there enough lifeboats? The Titanic was a marvel of engineering, a symbol of luxury and progress. But that grandeur was not reflected in one of the most basic elements of safety, lifeboats. On board were more than 2,200 people, yet there were only 20 lifeboats, with a total capacity of 1,178. In the best-case scenario, more than 1,000 people had no chance of evacuation. Technically, the Titanic complied with existing regulations. Maritime laws of the time were outdated and did not account for ships of such size. But this does not explain why the White Star Line did not voluntarily add more lifeboats. Some later testimonies claimed that the decision was made not to overcrowd the deck with lifeboats, because they would obstruct the view of first-class passengers. Aesthetics and the visual experience of luxury took precedence over safety. Others point to economic reasons, or simply negligence disguised as confidence. Worse still, when tragedy struck, several lifeboats were lowered without being filled. Some departed at half capacity. Amid the chaos, the lack of drills, training, and coordination made the situation even worse. This mystery is not only about numbers or regulations, it reveals a dangerous mindset of the era. The belief that such a majestic ship was invulnerable and that lifeboats were just a formality. That illusion cost more than 1,000 lives. His figure was imposing, his experience legendary. But on the night the Titanic sank, the fate of Captain Edward Smith became shrouded in contradictory accounts. What really happened to Captain Edward Smith? Captain Edward Smith was one of the most experienced sailors of his time, chosen to command the Titanic's maiden voyage because of his prestige and career. But his fate, like that of the ship, ended in mystery. During the sinking, several survivors gave differing accounts of his final moments. Some saw him calmly giving orders, helping with the evacuation. Others claimed he remained on the bridge, clinging to the wheel, waiting for the end. There were also those who said he jumped into the sea to try to save lives, or that he was swept away by a wave. There was even a theory that he committed suicide, though his body was never found and nothing was ever confirmed with certainty. The truth about his last moments sank with him, and so the captain of the greatest ocean liner of his time became an ambiguous legend, somewhere between the figure of a hero and that of a man defeated by fate. In the icy waters of the North Atlantic, with temperatures near -2°C, survival without protection was almost impossible. Most who fell into the sea died within minutes from hypothermia, which also explains why so many bodies, including the captain's, were never recovered. Desperation has a face, and on the Titanic, it took the form of screams, shoving, and perhaps gunfire. Some testimonies claim that the evacuation turned violent, were shots fired at passengers during the evacuation. Amid the utter chaos that reigned that morning, as hundreds of people fought for survival, disturbing reports emerged. Officers allegedly fired their weapons to control the crowd. Several witnesses stated that some members of the crew used deadly force to prevent desperate passengers from boarding lifeboats that were already full, especially when organization collapsed and panic swept over the deck. Violent scenes are said to have occurred. However, while these testimonies overlap in several details, there is no conclusive evidence, no records, no bodies with gunshot wounds identified, and no official reports to confirm it. What is certain is that officers were armed, and the desperation of more than 2,000 people faced with too few lifeboats could have triggered extreme reactions. In such an unprecedented situation, the line between order and survival became blurred, and as if the shortage of lifeboats were not enough, terror multiplied with the cold. The water was below freezing. Falling into the sea was, in most cases, a death sentence from hypothermia. Within minutes, bodies shut down. Like many details of that night, this mystery remains submerged in the Atlantic, among fragmented truths, rumors, and the silence of those who did not live to tell it. While the distress signals traveled through the ether, something dark happened in the radio room. Only one man survived to tell the story, and he changed his version more than once. What happened in the communications room? As the Titanic sank, the radio operators were sending distress calls without pause. One of them, Harold Bride, was the only witness to a confusing incident in the room. According to his first account, a crewman tried to attack his colleague, Jack Phillips, to steal his life jacket. Later, he said it had only been a struggle. Still later, he changed his story several times, creating doubts about what truly occurred. Was there violence, desperation, an attempt to cover something up? We will never know. Phillips died, and the truth sank with him. Like much of this story, the mystery remains trapped between versions that never fully align. The Titanic sank. That is a fact. But when you connect the dots, mistakes, omissions, strange decisions, an unsettling possibility arises. What if nothing was accidental? At first glance, the sinking of the Titanic was the result of a chain of errors. Ignored warnings, flawed design, adverse weather conditions. But when you examine the details closely, the coincidences begin to seem like too many. Why was it sailing so fast in an ice zone? Why were there no binoculars? Why so few lifeboats? Why didn't the warnings reach the captain? And above all, why did so many wrong decisions happen one after another, as if common sense itself had been switched off? Over the years, these questions have fueled theories ranging from negligence to conspiracy. Some suggest hidden financial interests. Others point to a supposed attempt to cover up a prior fire, or even the idea of a deliberate sinking to collect insurance. There is no conclusive evidence, but what is certain is that the Titanic did not sink only because of an iceberg, but because of a set of factors that still do not fully fit together. And as long as there are gaps in the story, the mystery will persist. Was it simply an accident, or something more? Now that we've unearthed the 10 most striking mysteries of the Titanic, we want to hear your opinion. Which one left you most unsettled? Do you think one of them might hold the true key to what happened that tragic night? Leave us your comment, and if you thought you had seen it all, get ready. The 5 conspiracy theories that follow could completely change what you thought you knew about the Titanic. More than a century after the disaster, the Titanic continues to generate questions that history has not been able to answer. And where answers are missing, theories are born. Some sound outlandish, others disturbingly plausible. But they all have one thing in common. They try to explain what still doesn't fully add up. Next, we will explore 5 of the most striking conspiracy theories that could completely change the way we see this tragedy. First, there is the theory that the Titanic was not the Titanic. According to this version, the ship that sank was actually its twin, the Olympic, damaged in a previous accident. The company supposedly switched the ship's identities to stage an accident and collect the insurance. Proof or paranoia? The debate remains open. Another theory suggests that the Titanic was sunk by a torpedo. Although the iceberg was officially blamed, some believe a German submarine attacked it by mistake. This idea gained traction after the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, but there is no concrete evidence to support it. There is also talk of a plan orchestrated by J.P. Morgan. The financial magnate, owner of the shipping line, canceled his ticket at the last moment, while 3 of his great rivals sailed and died. Was it mere coincidence, or part of a calculated move? A fourth theory involves another ship, the Samson. Some believe this Norwegian vessel was closer than the Californian, but chose not to respond to the Titanic's flares because it was illegally hunting seals and did not want to be exposed. Its presence was never confirmed, but suspicion lingers. And finally, there are those who claim that the fire in the coal bunker was the real culprit. A blaze that began before departure may have weakened the hull exactly where the iceberg later struck. If this is true, the Titanic may have been doomed before it even touched the ocean. The tragedy of the Titanic, beyond the romanticism that cinema and popular culture have woven around it, remains an incomplete mosaic of certainties and assumptions. Among the echoes of twisted steel and the stories of heroism and cowardice, an enigma survives, one that defies the passage of time. And while the remains of the Titanic rest in silence at the bottom of the Atlantic, we continue to search for answers. And you? Do you believe the Titanic sank purely by accident? Or is there something more that we still haven't been told? Tell us in the comments which conspiracy theory seems most plausible to you, or if you have one of your own. If this story about the Titanic has impacted you, subscribe to Cronoearth and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss history's greatest enigmas, because the secrets of the past still have much to reveal. See you on the next journey.